Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, the news editor of Musical America, and today we're going to be speaking with Doug Sheldon. Doug has been in the classical music business for many decades and, like the rest of us, has been shut down by the pandemic. But this week, he is re-emerging with his new firm, Sheldon Artists LLC, of which he is the founder and managing partner. And he's going to tell us a little bit about putting that firm together and what he thinks the future of classical music is going to be. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Happy to do it.
So, as you've been putting your firm together and your roster, what kinds of things have you been thinking about in terms of the future and how our business is going to look and how to be prepared for it and all of those kinds of things?
The business is in the process of changing in a dramatic way. It's not insignificant that Columbia went out of business. And it's not insignificant that the larger classical music agencies in the world are at least reducing their staff and, if possible, changing or getting out of their office lease. The pandemic, in shutting down concerts, which is particularly true here in the United States, simply means that artists and their agents and managers receive zero income.
Right.
And if you're carrying a large payroll or a large real estate monthly rental bill, they become so burdensome that you have to make changes. So the first thing that's going to happen, and is already happening in this business, is that the agency business is changing in a dramatic way. There'll be more and more individual managers with smaller rosters. There will be more and more agents operating from home. And there will be agencies that are smaller in the number of managers or the number of administrative staff that they have. Right. This isn't particular to artist agencies. I mean, the New York Philharmonic has reduced their administrative staff by 40 people, Boston by 50 people.
Right.
Everybody is going through a forced downsizing. Conditions make the downsizing necessary.
Right.
So we all have to figure out what kind of definition is possible for us to live and work in successfully. And it means that we have to be much more careful about all of the choices we make, whether it's where we work, or how much we travel. Managing expenses are becoming more important than ever in the arts, and they never were unimportant. But equally important is managing your time. What do you apply your time to? And that's a tough one, because most agencies in any case have a lot of artists that are not high earners. And so the ratio of your time and effort with income produced is not always a plus. And so therefore you can't manage the less known artist without having rather well-known artists. You've got to find a way to balance your time, your income. And when you're starting, in my case, from ground zero, yes, I'm going to manage some artists that I have previously or even always managed.
Right.
But I'm also managing some that I've never managed before, some that I've simply taken on recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I will have high-profile people like Anne-Sophie Mutter or Larry Gerge, for example. But I'm also, I have a consult part of my company where I have a 15-year-old Chinese violinist, a young lady, and a 16-year-old Russian violinist, a young man, that I think are the future. There's no money in that.
Yeah.
So, there's no money in present terms.
Right.
So you have to find that balance of what you can productively and intelligently and effectively do. I'm trying to do that which I love.
How will you be thinking about touring, especially orchestras? Where do you think that's going to go?
The touring world is a bit unknown in the short term for a number of reasons. All of these orchestras have enough problems solving their issues at home.
Right.
If you read the New York Times and they project losing 30 million in projected income that was once on the books now simply can't be realized because there are no concerts.
Right.
And if you read, which just happened recently, that they renegotiated their contract essentially with their musicians, and everybody top to bottom is approximately 25% down from whatever they were earning. That complicates not only the orchestra at home, but the orchestra on tour. And one of the things that goes with, we have a curious situation here. We have a pandemic and we have a recession, but the stock market is high. And those two things have never quite happened that way before.
Weird.
It's a weird situation.
Mm-hmm.
Those people who are in the stock market, particularly the richest, have their world is perfectly fine now.
Yeah.
Of us, the world is not perfectly fine, but it may mean that the nonprofits will be able to sustain the philanthropic giving, which keeps them alive. That's right. Even before the pandemic, there were orchestras that had trouble getting enough sponsorship,
right,
to make a tour possible. Sponsorship were difficult. In 2018 and 19, then we have to really think it's even more difficult in 2021 or 22. And so I personally believe that touring will go back to a normalcy. I believe concerts will go back to a normalcy. The question is when. The only question is when. I'm working right now on a Royal Philharmonic tour for 22 and one for Mariinsky for 22. And I'm working on a big tour for Asian tour for Anne-Sophie Mutter in 22. 22 is not going to be as strong as we're 2018 or 2019, but the market will come back. What is needed, of course, is the vaccine for the purpose of making the public psychology a normal, easy, natural, comfortable one for going into a Carnegie Hall and sitting shoulder to shoulder and front to back with 2,800 other people.
Right.
And that will come.
We were talking about touring, and beyond the financial considerations, there is also the greenhouse gases situation, and the and Brexit, and all of the current restrictions, not only due to the pandemic, but also due to the current administration's, how should we say nicely, limited view of who can travel and who cannot into this country. So let's start with the greenhouse gases.
I bluntly think it's a silly argument.
Really?
The only answer to that, it seemed sort of popular, on Slip Disc and a couple of those to talk about how terrible it would be, if the London Symphony flew an airplane to America and there was all of that pollution of the air. And okay, you can argue that that's terrible, and it's hard to argue against that. But the fact of the matter is that the world is built on the interaction of people and on travel. And it is going in the future to be built on travel. So
right.
The answer to that is building planes that are less destructive in their emissions. And there are planes being built. What am I trying to say here? To say that orchestras shouldn't tour because there should be fewer airplanes flying around the world, I think is just a crazy, silly statement, period. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't take climate change seriously. I do.
Yeah.
I think our own government's policy about immigration, or who we can let in or who we won't let in, and now what we're going to charge those who come in. If you're an international artist now, your visa cost is going to go up more than 200%.
Incredible.
The process is going to be more cumbersome because now you can't do one visa application for a tour party of 100 people. They want to put a limit of 25, so you have to do 4 applications for the same ensemble. So, what our government has done that is frankly anti-climate control and anti-immigration, the big word of immigration on all levels, has been one of the real negative things that's happened in the 21st century.
Yep.
Perhaps the new administration will turn that around, and I think they will. I think there'll be more humanity in how our government thinks and speaks and acts, and hopefully more humanity in us. But I'm a big believer that culture and the arts and music are a tremendous socializing and civilizing force and humanizing force. So I think we'll rebound in all aspects of what we're doing. Our paradigm for how we manage it, how we organize it, how we run it and administrate it, that's going to change.
And what about artist fees?
Nearly 45 years ago. And artist fees were the subject of what can we possibly do? The business is in such terrible shape. And I was a young man, and so I hadn't learned sometimes that I shouldn't always say what was on my mind, but I did say what was on my mind. And I said, I'll fight for it. If you want artist fees down, I will fight for it. The moment you tell me that your musicians' fees are going down, that your staff is going down, and your fees are going down. Because artist fees are not the germ of the business. It's one of the elements that needs to be addressed. In America, the musicians' fee are a much bigger problem. No orchestra in the world earns what the top American, anything like it, nothing like
right.
it. But
I know.
Okay, that's the same thing is true of the CEOs. No CEOs in Germany or England or Spain or France earn what American CEOs of big arts institutions earn. Now, everybody's going to try lesser fees, and it doesn't matter if the New York Philharmonic can reduce the AFM contract with its musicians by 25 to 30%, you can be sure that everybody else is going to have a reduction, whether it's the CEO or a staff member or the artist.
Right.
And every time the artist fee goes down, the agent's fee goes down. So that's in the mix. Who gets paid how much is decidedly in this economic discussion, top to bottom.
And There has been discussion about the force majeure clause. Is that going to, you think that's going to go away after this, or what do you think?
I think pandemic is legitimate force majeure, and I'm very pro force majeure clause. I don't think it should be tampered with. If there are conditions that cannot be controlled, that's an emergency. That's an act of God. That's force majeure. And I think it's right that cancellation takes place without penalty to either party. And I also think it's right that each has the obligation to reschedule that which was canceled by force majeure. Now we're into what is a proper business standard. To cancel and to say, I owe you nothing, I owe you no obligation to try and make this whole at another time, I don't think is ethically correct. But frankly, that could be true not only for the presenter, but for the artist. The artist could say, well, in the future, I don't really want to go back there anyway. They weren't paying me enough, and I won't go back. But I think the honorable thing to do is to face a force majeure for what it is and make best efforts to restore by rescheduling what you originally committed to do. I was just on the telephone today with Anne-Sophie Mutter, who says rescheduling for me has been crazy, trying to figure out, because their presenters do want her to come back and she wants to go back, trying to figure out how to do this. And now what happens? Germany shuts down for November, and now they're going to shut down for December. And now I have to start a whole other process of rescheduling. It's a headache and really a massive problem for all parties. If we want the business to survive, we have to take on these challenges. It's nothing that we haven't done on a smaller level before. We just have to apply ourselves to solve these issues.
Well, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
And
thank you.
We'll be in touch. And congratulations again on your
Thank
new firm.